You ever stop and think about who really built the digital world we live in? I'm not talking about the famous faces you see on magazine covers. I mean the architects, the people working behind the scenes, laying the actual foundation that everything else is built on. Well, today, we're going to dive into the story of one of the most important people in tech that you've probably never even heard of, Dennis Ritchie.
You know, this quote from MIT professor Martin Rinard, it just says it all, doesn't it? We celebrate the people who design the shiny, beautiful things we can see and touch. But the guy who created the tools to build it all, Dennis Ritchie, he stayed pretty much in the shadows. So let's bring his work into the light.
All right, let's kick things off with that very idea. This huge contrast between who gets the fame and who has the real fundamental impact.
So on one hand, you've got a face that pretty much everyone recognizes, right? Someone like Steve Jobs, a name synonymous with tech gadgets. And on the other hand, you have Dennis Ritchie. And here's the crazy part. While he never wanted the spotlight, his work is way more deeply woven into our daily lives than almost anyone else's.
And look, his colleague Rob Pike was not exaggerating one bit. I want you to really think about this for a second. The web browser you're probably watching this on, it's written in C. The servers sending this to you, C. The operating system on your phone, on your computer, the routers connecting everything, it is all standing on the foundation that Dennis Ritchie built. It's everywhere.
So to really get why his creation was such a game changer, we have to go back in time. Let's head to Bell Labs, late 1960s. The world of computing was just overwhelmingly complex, and that frustration created the perfect opening for a totally new idea.
See, Bell Labs was involved in this huge, super ambitious project to build an operating system called Multics. But honestly, it was a beast. It was slow, it was clunky, it was expensive. By 1969, they just pulled the plug. And that left his team of brilliant engineers, including Ritchie and his friend Ken Thompson, thinking, man, there has got to be a better way.
And what's just mind-blowing is what they were working with. They wanted to build a new, simpler system, but they were using a spare computer, a DEC PDP-7, that had just 8 kilobytes of memory. That's less than a single plain text email today. But here's the thing, that limitation, it wasn't a bug, it was a feature. It forced them to be incredibly efficient, elegant, and smart.
And it was right there, in that quest for elegant simplicity, that the C programming language came to be. But it didn't just appear out of thin air. No, it was an evolution.
Ritchie actually wrote all about this himself. He never saw C as some lightning bolt of genius. For him, it was just the next logical step forward, built on the shoulders of the languages that came right before it.
So here's how it all went down. You had a language called BCPL. Ken Thompson took that and simplified it into a language he called B to build the first version of Unix. But B had a big problem. It was typeless. It basically couldn't tell the difference between a number and a letter of the alphabet. And that's where Ritchie comes in. He took B and he added one crucial thing, data types. That was the leap. That's what turned it into C, a language powerful and flexible enough to build an entire operating system.
Okay, so C was born out of necessity. But why did it end up taking over the entire world? What was the secret sauce? I absolutely love this quote from Ritchie himself. He wasn't a salesman. He was a practical engineer. He knew C wasn't perfect, but he also knew it was incredibly useful, and its success was no accident.
So a few things came together. First, C and Unix were like best friends. They grew up together. The tools to compile C were simple, and it was fast. So fast, in fact, that you could use it for things you used to need assembly language for. But the absolute killer feature? Portability. For the very first time, you could write a piece of software, like, say, the entire Unix operating system, and run it on a completely different kind of computer just by recompiling it. This changed everything.
And this slide, from one of Ritchie's own presentations, gives you a peek right into his mindset. He wasn't trying to create something theoretically perfect. His whole philosophy was, make it available, make it usable, get it mostly right the first time. C wasn't supposed to be some beautiful object for academics to study. It was a tool for builders to get stuff done.
Which brings us right to his legacy. And it's a legacy that isn't defined by fame or fortune, but by the quiet, monumental creation of the tools that gave generations of builders the power to create our modern world.
Everyone who knew him says the same thing. He was private, quiet, humble. As his colleague Brian Kernighan put it, he just didn't do any self-salesmanship. He just built amazing things that worked, and in the process, well, he completely changed the world.
Now, he may not be a household name, but let me tell you, his peers knew exactly who he was. He won the Turing Award, which is basically the Nobel Prize for computing, and he got the National Medal of Technology, the highest tech honor you can get in the US. In his world, he was an absolute rock star.
So we'll end on this thought from his longtime friend and colleague, Brian Kernighan. It just captures it all so perfectly. He wasn't the face of the digital revolution, no, but he was the one who provided the shoulders for pretty much everyone else to stand on. And that really makes you wonder, whose shoulders will the next generation be standing on?